Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we are anti-war and pro-self-defense. This is episode 72, and I'm going to talk about my experience at the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity in Dulles, just outside Washington, D.C. for the 2023 conference, Which Way America? So to give you a little bit of background, most of my life has been apolitical, right? Not really involved in political matters. And that's pretty much because I didn't know anything. I didn't know enough to vote. I didn't know what was going on because I was struggling with identity issues, as I explained whenever I talk about race. So I had all these identity issues, struggling to try to figure out who I am and how I'm supposed to live my life and how I'm supposed to have a functional relationship with my family. So that pretty much consumed most of my time, and didn't have any time for politics. Plus, if someone asked me who I voted for, and I would tell them who I voted for, if someone were to ask me, why did you vote for that person? I wouldn't have an answer. And even if I did have an answer, how would I defend some of the policies that that particular presidential candidate was supporting? So if I couldn't support someone 100%, then I wasn't going to vote for that person, because there would be certain things that I would not be able to defend, right? How could you vote for that person if they're for this or for that? Now, if I could defend those decisions on the part of the candidate, then that person would have my vote. So because I wasn't voting and I didn't belong to any political party, it was a lot more fun to just simply make fun of every single politician who would make the news, right? Or who would make some kind of vain promise and then not carry through with their promise. And it was a lot of fun. I got to make fun of pretty much everybody, regardless of their political affiliation. And it was very entertaining for the students as well. And then back in 2005, the curriculum for the program in which I was teaching changed. And so I had to find new books to, that I would choose to teach from a list, right, to teach to students. And in that process, there was a book, Free to Choose by Milton and Rose Friedman. And I knew nothing about the book. I knew nothing about the authors, but it had free in the title. And I said, hey, how bad could this be, right? So I started reading it and was absolutely blown away, right? Especially when, and I think I explained this before, I got to the story of the pencil, the graphite pencil, and everything clicked. I had just finished my PhD in race theory and realized that most of 99% of race theory is pretty much hypocritical. And so I was in a quandary trying to work that out. And then they were changing the curriculum on me. And then I read this, and that one little story of the pencil, everything was resolved. And so I threw myself headlong into the free market. In the middle of the semester, I changed my syllabus, reorganized my syllabus in my race class too. You could do those things in those days. And was so excited to share with everyone what I figured out. And so then for a few more years, trying to catch up with all of the free market literature that's already out there. I went from being an avid follower of Friedman, but at the same time feeling very uncomfortable when he would go into certain policies, especially some of the policies that he helped the government with, And so I graduated from Friedman to Ludwig von Mises and the Mises Institute. And most of that was at the result of my pursuit of consistency in the stuff that I would use as a groundwork for a lot of my own personal, mental and academic orientation. And so there I am trying to catch up on all this stuff, right? I'm going on YouTube and trying to find anything that I could listen to. And I stumble on this video, John Stossel interviewing this guy, Ron Paul. And I was like, who is this dude? And I was absolutely floored, right? His guy is a politician, yet what he's saying was everything that I agreed with. And so, and he was extremely consistent. And then I did more research on him. And not only did he say the things that resonated with me, but he actually acted according to what he said he was going to do. And he did not compromise the fact that he was a representative of the people of the community who elected him from Texas. And so even if, there were some constituents who asked him to make certain proposals, however they do it in Congress, because he is their representative, he would fill out the paperwork and he would submit it, even though it went against what he believed was true. As a representative of those people, he would do it, right? But he knew that people would ask him about it, but people would say, hey, isn't that hypocritical? Doesn't that go contradict what you say you believe? And say, hey, I represent them. I'm obligated to submit that kind of paperwork. And so every time I heard him answer a question or a challenge, it made complete sense to me. And it was not in any way authoritarian. It did not impose on other people. And so this was incredible. That was 2011. And then I found out that he had run for president in 2008. And then I recalled that around 2007, 2008, early part of 2008, someone or a group of people went around campus and wrote in chalk, Ron Paul 2008, everywhere, all over campus, on the sidewalk, right? And so, they wouldn't get in trouble because they didn't write it on the buildings. They didn't write it, right? They must have done it in the middle of the night. And I'm talking, it was all over campus. It's an urban campus. It's sprawling. It's, all over the place. And yet, I don't know how many people were doing it, but it was everywhere. But I didn't know who he was, never heard of him. And so I just, didn't think of it. But in 2011, that's when I remembered. I was like, oh, yeah, I remember this name. So the first time I voted was in 2012 for him in the primaries. And then, in the primaries, he didn't make it past the primaries, obviously. And on top of that, he was a Christian. And I know it's not a big deal for everybody, but it was very interesting to me. How do you be a Christian and yet advocate a lot of these ideas? And I was still in the process of working all of that out. And so he basically filled in a lot of blanks for me. He reminds me a lot of my father. Ron Paul is a little younger than my dad, but nevertheless, just that consistency, that unwavering consistency, no matter how much heat is thrown in his way, no matter how much opposition there is, because what's true, you're not going to compromise on that. And so I didn't know Ron Paul from earlier days, but I know my father, if something was shown to him as being incorrect, he rolled with it. He adapted. He didn't double down and basically resist acknowledging what is shown to him as being incorrect, but he realized that there was something better. And so he rolled with it. And that's what I always appreciated about him. Let's see. And so because of my teaching schedule and my preaching schedule, right, I had basically 2 full-time jobs, teaching during the week, preaching on the weekends. There was just no free time to actually go see a conference before. But of course, because, my university didn't renew my contract, and arbitration doesn't happen until March, and that's why I'm anonymous, because I don't want anything interfering with that, right? So after March, then I'm just basically going to not be anonymous anymore. But so I'm not teaching at the university. I'm teaching middle school now, and school hasn't started yet. So I was able to go down this past Saturday, and I've been wanting to go for a while, but this year was the first time I was able to go. I wasn't actually able to meet him or take a picture with him, but I did hear him speak. So I can say that I did that at least once, right? But I did meet Daniel McAdams and Jeff Deist. So that was pretty very much cool for me. I forgot to reach out to Chris Rossini, but hopefully I'll make it next year and I'll be able to grab a selfie with him as well. But anyway, it was a really diverse crowd, needs more Asians. I gotta say though, I felt like I was back in college where there were more Asians than there were African Americans, uh, but still not a whole lot of Asians and even fewer African Americans. And so that was kind of a little bit sad to see. I can't speak for the African American community, but I know Asians are generally conformists. And so, you know, this libertarian-ish, pro-peace, anti-establishment thing is very, very unpopular in Asian circles, right? Especially when conformity is what is has been basically worked into the culture, many Asian cultures for the last 2000 years, right? So success depends on how well you conform. And so, you know, over those thousands of years, hundreds and hundreds of years, uh, you know, that's going to be, I think, a genetic disposition of many Asians. My dad, of course, was a free thinker, radical, controversial, always getting in trouble with the authorities. And so that was passed on to me. And so I felt right at home, right? But it was a diverse crowd. And what united everyone there was the peace message, right? The anti-war, pro-peace message. And it was pushed in, you know, and the argument for peace was presented in multiple ways. At least that's the way I interpret the conference. Yeah, it was kind of a fundraiser. Yeah, it was an opportunity to touch base with all the people that you know, Dr. Paul knew while he was in DC, right, to maintain those connections. And yeah, it was also a networking time, but it was also an opportunity to listen to speakers in person. And the general vibe was pro-peace, right? So it was a discussion on the war, with the exception of probably possibly one, Jonathan Turley, I believe. No. It was one of the oh, let me see, where is it? Oh, Vlahos, I think, right? Where or no, maybe it was Jonathan Turley. Yeah, right, because he's the law professor, right? And so he discussed, you know, the court indictments, you know, how severe or how real or not real they are against Trump. And so that was kind of interesting. So aside from that one, but you could almost consider that as part of the pro-peace argument, right? Because Trump is saying he'll end the war of aggression in the Ukraine, right? He'll just bring all the troops home. And so one could argue that people are blocking him from presidency because he will end the gravy train for the military industrial complex. I mean, that argument can be made. But anyway, except for that, most of the other speakers focused on this. Wow, it seems like every time I do a recording, there's a fire. But anyway, my neighborhood is not that bad, but in any case. So there are all these different perspectives, journalism, academic perspective from Michael Vlahos, journalism perspective from Anya Parampil and Max Blumenthal, a military perspective, of course, with Colonel Douglas McGregor, who I've mentioned several times in the past, an entrepreneurial perspective with Gary Haven, and of course, Ron Paul himself, Jeff Deist, and Daniel McAdams, right? Jeff Deist, who at one time was, what do you call it? Perhaps president, I guess, would be the correct title, of the Mises Institute. He talked about dollar being a weapon of mass destruction, and the rise and why the dollar would probably, in spite of all of its destruction that it meets out to other countries, because 40 to 70% of all dollars all dollar currency exists outside of the United States, and that's a lot, it'll take a while for the dollar to probably come off of its reserve currency status, in spite of all the things that are happening with BRICS, right? So basically, some of the things that were said was that we're bankrupt, right? Which is then causing the government to turn to things like CBDCs. At the same time we're bankrupt, the dollar still has some value outside of the United States. And so we see that the government is busy enriching politically connected people at the expense of everyone else. I mean, we're seeing it, right? Billions of dollars sent to the Ukraine, but $700 per family in Hawaii, right? That's nuts, right? And it's amazing to me that more people are not speaking out against that. But again, that speaks to this sort of myopia, this myopic way, subjectivity that a lot of people have today, right? They see no evil except with Putin, right? If Putin or Trump is being talked about, there's the evil, nothing else is evil, right? So it's kind of crazy. So even all the money laundering that's happening right now through the Ukraine, yeah, it's a non-issue because Putin has to be rubbed out. You know, that's all we're seeing. And I'm curious, right, with all the money laundering that we're seeing going on through Ukraine, that is it that just like a pump and dump, is it that all of these a stock market pump and dump, is it all these people trying to get out, right, trying to get out of the dollar while they still can, while it still has value, while you still can buy things with it, you know, are people trying to get out and leaving us with the bag, right, leaving everyone else you know, being the suckers when everything crashes. So, you know, Colonel McGregor believes that the BRICS Bank has a lot more currency, has a lot more legs than Jeff Dice does, obviously. But still, the general direction is that the dollar is losing its status, right? Primarily because of all of the war and all of the aggression that the United States is carrying out. Undeniable, right? Unless, of course, you are have a very, very narrow subjectivity because you've been socialized not to see anything else. Censorship in the media is discussed, and there are many, many ways that censorship is being carried out. I believe Max Blumenthal's organization, the Gray Zone, had raised, I think, $90,000 through GoFundMe, and then it was seized, and they still can't have access to it, right? And so if you are saying and speaking out against the state and its foreign policy, then the government comes after you. And so I guess I should be thankful that I don't have too many listeners, because then you know, why would anyone come after me? But there is censorship in views, right? Censorship, if you are saying the wrong thing, then you're not allowed to be heard. Weaponization of federal agencies and the legal system, you know, basically makes this a banana republic. The United States is no longer a legitimate law-based society. It's a banana republic where they go after your political enemies, whether they are running for election or not. They come after your finances. They come after you with the IRS, with all these government agencies. And meanwhile, the United States military is a paper tiger, right? The Russians have technology that the US doesn't, and Colonel McGregor has explained this previously, where whereas Russia went into military research, the United States went into biological research, and that's why they developed their Cervasis, right? All of that is because of funding, right? And pouring all of the money and the corruption and the bribes to make that work in other countries, instead of, you know, investing in upgrading all of the defense weapons here in the United States. But, you know, the great thing about getting together like that, as depressing as many of the messages were, was to demonstrate that we are not alone, right? The number of people who are pro-peace in this country is very small, it seems to me. And so it often you feel like it's vain, right? Any effort that you might make is just going to fall on deaf ears, and there's nothing can possibly happen positive. And then you go to a place like that, and there was 500 people in a room, give or take. And but everyone was pro peace there. You could walk up to anybody and strike up a conversation and not worry about having to trigger someone, or trying to avoid triggering someone. It was awesome. It really was. Ron Paul calls this group of people the remnant, and it's a scriptural reference, right? The prophet Isaiah, when he was in basically he's seeing that the northern kingdom is about to be taken over by the Assyrians, and he laments and he says, there's no one left in this country aside from me who's a faithful follower of you. And then God replies, no, there's a remnant, right? There's a group of people who are still faithful to God. And so in that way, so many of this society has turned away from just the rule of law, from the principles of freedom, from desiring peace in our lives. So many people have gone away, but there is still a remnant. And so that's pretty cool. I've heard him refer to the remnant for years now. I don't know when he started. Obviously, it was before I started listening to him. I wish I had more of a following so that it'd be worth, I'd be worth something to network with. But hopefully next year, I'll be able to go, and that at least I'll be better established doing something, right? But it was cool after being so frustrated with the willful ignorance of so many people that I know. It was great to interact with other people who sees the corruption and all of the negative subjectivities out there, and they have a desire to promote peace, and they do it in so many different ways. And that is what this podcast is supposed to be about promoting alternative perspectives, which are better than the ones that we already know, the ones that are causing us and giving us problems. So what would be a better solution? And so to achieve this, we have to recognize which are the costly subjectivities, the ones that promote war, the ones that support corruption, the ones that ignore all of the evil that's going on elsewhere. Realize that it's unsustainable, especially unsustainable if it means that we're going to destroy ourselves in the process. But how do you see those alternatives, right? And it's about understanding subjectivity, that if we allow people to live their lives, to make choices according to what they think is according to their calculation, then we get to observe other people, see how things worked out for them, which might inspire us to find a different idea, to find a different solution, which is a better solution than what we had before. And remember, this desire to resolve our problems means that we need more information. And the more information that we have, the odds and probability of resolving our problem peacefully increases, right? Because remember what a problem is. A problem is just simply the evidence that you have reached the limit of your knowledge. And so you just need more information to be able to get beyond that wall of that mental box. And we need this, especially since so many people today are trying to profit off of the chaos and death that's going on, not just in Ukraine, but all over the place here in the United States as well. That's it for this episode. I will talk to you tomorrow.